Fourth dwelling. As we begin to explore the fourth dwelling, I pause to surrender myself again to the Holy Spirit. I pray that from this point onward, He take over and speak for me so that you can most clearly hear what needs to be said about the remaining chambers in this castle of the soul. Now is when we enter the realm of the supernatural. 14 years ago, when I wrote the book of my life, His Majesty explained these ineffable matters for me, and I'm counting on Him to do it again here. Although I think I am a little more enlightened now about these mercies the Beloved grants to some souls, knowing how to describe them is a different thing. If there is any benefit in efforts to express the inexpressible, may His Majesty help me to do so now. If not, so be it. Since these dwellings are getting nearer to where the King lives, they are more beautiful. There are things to see and understand here so sublime that unless someone had direct experience with them, words would be useless to convey them, and the mind incapable of grasping them. Someone with a great deal of spiritual background will understand the subtleties perfectly, although generally a person must have lingered long in the previous dwellings before entering this one, because there are no rules about it. The Beloved gives when He wishes, as He wishes, and to whom He wishes. Since those blessings come from Him, of course, injustice is not possible. Poisonous creatures rarely enter these dwellings. When they do, they are usually harmless and may even do the soul some good. In this stage of prayer, it is helpful to have some of them around launching a few battles in the soul. If there were no temptations, the spirit of evil could more easily slip in and deceive the soul about the spiritual delight she is being given by God. If she were not struggling with temptation, the soul would not be gaining merit. She would collapse into a state of habitual absorption, deprived of the opportunities to grow. I don't consider it safe to stay in such a state. I don't even think it's possible for the Spirit of the Lord to remain perpetually fixed in the soul during this life of exile. What then is the difference between spiritual sweetness and consolations in prayer? It seems to me that we can be consoled through our own meditations and through our supplications to our Beloved. Although God does have a hand in them, as He does, of course, in everything, consolations spring from our own nature. What I mean is that solace arises from the virtuous acts we perform. It feels like we've earned it through our own efforts. It is correct for us to feel consoled when we act righteously. But ponder this, and you will see that we can derive the same kind of satisfaction from various worldly experiences. For instance, if we were to suddenly inherit an unanticipated fortune, if we met someone and fell madly in love when we weren't even looking for love, if we were to succeed in some significant business venture and everyone praised our skill, if we had been told that our husband or brother or daughter was dead and then they came back to us alive. I have seen people weep for pure joy. I have even done so myself. I believe that the joyful feelings that come from us from God are similar to natural consolations, except that their source is nobler. This is not to suggest that worldly delights are in any way a bad thing. What I'm trying to say is that earthly satisfactions spring from our own nature and end in God. Spiritual sweetness begins in God and makes its way into our human nature, where we delight in it far more than we enjoy the worldly kind of gratification. O Jesus, how I long to be able to explain this. I clearly perceive an important distinction between these two states, and yet I do not have the skills to communicate it. May the Beloved do it for me. I just remembered the verse we say at the end of the last psalm at Prime. Cum dilatasti cor meum. Sorry for those pronunciations, guys. For those who know from experience the difference between these things, no further explanation is necessary. For those who don't, more words are required. Natural consolations do not expand the heart. Sometimes they even constrain it a little. The soul may feel profoundly happy when she thinks she is doing something for God, but sometimes she sheds bitter tears springing from the passions. I don't know that much about these passions of the soul. If I did, maybe I would be more successful in explaining which issue from the sensual part of our nature and which come from a higher place. I have been through this, but I am powerless to explain it. If only I could. Knowledge and learning can be such a great help in everything. When I would experience this state of sweetness and spiritual blessing in prayer, if I began to weep over the Passion of Christ, I could not stop until my head was burning. If I wept over my own imperfections, the same thing happened. Copious tears and splitting headaches. The Beloved was doing me a big favor in this. Sometimes tears flow from moments like these and intense longings rise up. They are reinforced by nature, by human nature, and by our individual personalities. They always come to rest in God. As long as there is humility and the soul understands that she is no more special than anyone else for having these experiences, these feelings are a great blessing. It's not possible to know whether or not they spring from pure love, but if they do, they belong to God alone. It is mostly the souls in the first three dwellings who apprehend feelings of devotion. These are the souls these are the souls who apply the discursive mind to their meditations. This is all they have. It would be good for them to spend some time actively praising God, rejoicing in his goodness and in his being what he is, and desiring his honor and glory. They should do this as much as possible because such acts of love are great awakeners of the will. If the Beloved fills the soul with blessings like these, she should not turn away from them for the sake of completing her prescribed meditation. Remember, if you want to make progress on the path and ascend to the places you've longed for, the important thing is not to think much, but to love much, and so to do whatever best awakens you to love. Maybe we don't know what love is. It wouldn't surprise me one bit to find out that this is true. That's because love is not about our own happiness, but about trying to please God in every way. Loving God means striving not to dishonor him. Loving God means asking that the beauty of his Son be celebrated among the people. These are signs of love. Don't assume that you're never supposed to think about anything else and that if you become a little distracted, all is lost. I used to be tormented by this turmoil of thoughts. A little over 4 years ago, I came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same as mindfulness. I asked a wise man about this, and he affirmed my insight, which thrilled me. I hadn't been able to understand why, if the mind is one of the faculties of the soul, it is sometimes so restless. Thoughts fly around so fast that only God can anchor them. And when he does, we feel almost as if we were disconnected from the holy body. It was driving me crazy to see the faculties of my soul calmly absorbed in remembrance of God, while my thoughts, on the other hand, were wildly agitated. O beloved, bear in mind what anguish we have to suffer on this path through lack of knowing the truth. The trouble is that since we think all we have to do is concentrate our thoughts on you, we can't even conceive of how to ask the ones who know the truth about this or comprehend how to frame the question in the first place. We suffer terrible trials because we do not understand ourselves. We worry about things that we think are bad, but which are actually good things. This lack of knowledge afflicts many people who practice prayer. They complain of interior trials, grow depressed, and their health declines. They may even abandon prayer altogether. These are people who have not learned to look inside themselves and discover the inner world there. Can we stop the stars from hurtling across the heavens? No. We cannot stop the mind either. Off it goes, and then we send all the faculties after it. We end up thinking that we are lost and blaming ourselves for wasting precious time in the presence of God. But it could be that the soul is fully present with him in the innermost chamber while the mind stays on the periphery of the palace, grappling with 1,000 wild and dangerous creatures and gaining real merit from this kind of struggle. The spirit of evil would like nothing better than for us to just give up at this point and abandon our spiritual practice. Don't lose heart. Trials and disturbances like these come mostly from not understanding ourselves. As I write this, by the way, I can't help but wonder what's going on inside my own head. Those noises I told you about in the beginning are getting so loud that it's almost impossible for me to obey the order to write this. It sounds like there are a multitude of rushing rivers inside my head, their waters cascading downward, surrounding by many little birds and other whistling sounds. This is all unfolding not in the ears, but in the upper part of the head, where they say the higher part of the soul resides. I have spent long periods in these regions. The spirit seems to push its way upward with great power and speed. Please God that I remember to mention the reason for this when we get to the later dwellings, because this is not quite the right place to go into it. I would not be surprised to find out that the Beloved has given me this trouble in my head just so that I can understand all this better. The truth is, all this turmoil does not hinder my prayer or interfere with what I am trying to say. Instead, my soul is whole within its quietude, its love, its longing, and its clarity of consciousness. But if the higher part of the soul is in the upper part of the head, why isn't the soul disturbed by all the commotion? I don't know about that, but I do know that what I've been saying is true. When prayer is not accompanied by the suspension of the faculties, it hurts. When the faculties are suspended, we do not feel pain until they are engaged again. It would be a travesty to let this problem convince us to give up prayer. It isn't good to let our thoughts disturb us or worry us at all. If they come from the spirit of evil, they'll pass. But if this misery is part of our legacy from Adam's weakness and from our own imperfections, let us suffer it patiently for the love of God. After all, we put up with eating and sleeping and cannot avoid them, even though we might sometimes wish to. Let us acknowledge our misery. Let us yearn for that place where no one can scorn us. I'm thinking of the words the bride sang in the Song of Songs, and I see that they apply here perfectly. It seems to me that none of the contempt or tribulation we endure in this life can compare to those inner battles. If we find peace where we live, there is no conflict that can disquiet us. But if the cause of our strife is within ourselves, then no matter how much we desire relief from the thousand trials of this world, and no matter how much the Beloved desires this tranquility for us, the results will be almost unbearably painful. And so, Beloved, please raise us to the place where the miseries that taunt the soul, relent. God will free the soul from suffering when He delivers her into the final dwelling, even in this very lifetime. If it be His will, we shall explore this. These miseries do not torment everyone as badly as they afflicted me for so many years. I thought I had been a bad person, and it seems to me, in retrospect, that I was trying to get back at myself, because the experience was so painful for me. I feel like I should share it just in case it is like that for you, too. I will try describing it in a number of ways so that you will see this kind of thing is unavoidable and should not overly disturb you. Just let that old mill go on clanking around and around and continually grinding your own flour. Don't let the will or the understanding stop working. Depending on our health and on the effects of time, this trouble will be more intense or less so. Even if it is not the poor soul's fault, she will suffer anyway. We will commit other errors together, so we might as well practice patience. Although we are continually advised in our reading and counseling not to pay too much attention to our thoughts, we do not seem to quite get it. So I don't think it's a waste of time for me to go into it more deeply and try to offer you some comfort. Of course, until the Beloved chooses to enlighten you, these words won't help much. Still, I think that His Majesty wishes we would do whatever it takes to understand ourselves. We need to be we need to quit blaming the soul for problems caused by a weak imagination, human nature, and the spirit of evil. Chapter 2 of the Fourth Dwelling. God help me in this mess I have gotten myself into. I have forgotten what I was writing about last. Business and health matters forced me to set the work aside just when we were getting up to the best part so far. Since I have such a poor memory, it will probably all be very confusing from here on because I simply cannot bear to go back and read it over again. That is what I'm worried about anyway. It seems to me that I was talking about consolations in prayer and how they are sometimes entwined in our passions. You can trigger fits of sobbing. I have heard some people say that they experience a sense of constriction in their chests and even uncontrollable movements in their limbs. These experiences can be so powerful that they can cause nosebleeds and other painful effects. Since I haven't been through anything like this myself, I can't say much about it. I'm sure these kinds of things must be very consoling. though, because they're all about loving God and basking in His presence. What I call spiritual sweetness is a very different thing. Those of you who have experienced this will know what I mean. In other books, I have referred to this state as the prayer of quiet. See if this image helps you understand what I mean. There are two fountains, and they each have a basin to be filled with water. You know, I haven't found any better metaphor for describing certain spiritual experiences than water. I love this element. I have spent a great deal of time contemplating it. These two basins fill up different ways. The water from one comes from far away, carried through many aqueducts requiring much ingenuity. The source of water for the other one is right beside it, and the basin fills soundlessly. The spring is abundant, and so the basin spills over, and a large stream flows from it. This requires no engineering skills or the construction of conduits. The water just continuously bubbles forth. I think that the water that comes through the aqueducts is like a spiritual consolations in meditation. We draw these consolations through our thoughts. We meditate on created forms to help us, and we fatigue our minds. Finally, through our own efforts, comforting feelings come splashing in, making noise as they fill up the basins. With the other fountains, the water springs directly from its own source, God. When His Majesty wishes to bless us with supernatural favor, the delight brings with it the greatest peace, quietude, and sweetness to our innermost selves. I don't know where it comes from or how it comes. Earthly consolations are felt in the heart. This kind is not, at least not at first. Later, once the spiritual delight has filled every vessel in the soul, overflowing into all the faculties in each of the dwellings, it reaches the body. That's why I say it starts in God and ends in ourselves. Anyone who has experienced this knows that ultimately our whole outer selves definitely come to enjoy these sweet pleasures. As I write this, I'm thinking again of that verse I mentioned, dilatasti cor meum, which says that the heart is expanded, but I still don't think that this is an experience of the heart. I think its source is much deeper inside. I think it must come from the very core of our being. I have seen secret things in the soul that have left me dumbfounded, and how many more than these there must be. Oh, my beloved, my God, how awesome is your grandeur. We walk around down here like silly little shepherds, believing that we are starting to actually know something about you, but it must add up to nothing at all. There are even secrets in our own selves that we cannot fathom. What I mean is that in light of the vastness that is God, our little minds can know nothing at all. This is not to say that what we do see of you is not extraordinarily wonderful, or that your works are anything less than magnificent. Returning to the biblical passage, what is most useful here, I think, is the part about expansion. As the heavenly water begins to surge from the spring and deep inside us, it spreads and expands our whole inner being and gives rise to ineffable blessings. The soul herself cannot even understand what is unfolding here. She senses a certain fragrance, we could say, as within the depths of her being there were burning coals sprinkled with sweet perfumes. We cannot see the light or locate the source of the fire, but the sweet smelling warmth permeates the whole of the soul and maybe even spreads into the body. Look, try to understand what I'm saying. We don't actually feel heat or smell an aroma. The experience is far more delicate than that. Even if you have not gone through these things yourself, you must know that they really do happen. The soul perceives and understands this more clearly than my mere words could ever express. No matter how intensely we may crave spiritual delight, we cannot acquire it through our own efforts. It is not forged of the same metal that we are, but it is made from the purest gold of divine wisdom. I don't think the faculties are unified here, but they are absorbed, gazing amazed at what they behold. It could be that as I write about these matters, I am contradicting what I have said in other places. Almost 15 years have passed since I composed the book of my life, and maybe the Beloved has given me clearer insight about these matters than I had before. Of course, I could be just as mistaken now as I was then, but I could not be lying. By the mercy of God, I would rather die 1,000 deaths than lie. I am just sharing what I know to be true. It seems to me that our will here is in some way united with God's will, but there is no better crucible for testing the genuine value of prayer than the effects and the actions that follow it. If the person receiving this grace recognizes it, then the Beloved is granting her an incredibly great favor. If she doesn't turn back, he is granting her another huge favor. You will want to attain this depth of prayer yourselves, my friends, and you will be right to want this. The soul can never understand the blessings the Beloved is granting her here or the love which he is drawing her nearer and nearer to himself. It would be a good thing to know how to obtain this mercy. I'll tell you what I have found out about it. There are, of course, times when the Beloved grants his blessings for no other reason than simply because he wants to. He knows why, and we shouldn't meddle in this. After you've done what you need to do in the dwellings you've passed through, remember humility. Humility. This is how the Beloved allows himself to be conquered and will do anything you want. The way you will know if you are humble is that you will not believe that you have earned these mercies and blessings from the Beloved, nor that you will ever have them in your whole life. You will ask me how you will never attain them if you do not seek them out. My answer is that there is no better way than by not striving. Here are some reasons why. First, we must love God above all, unmotivated by self-interest. Second, thinking that in exchange for our insignificant services we are entitled to such a great reward indicates a slight lack of humility. Third, true preparation for these blessings consists not in the desire for consolations, but in the desire to suffer as the Beloved suffered. Fourth, while His Highness is bound to grant us glory if we keep His commandments, He is not obliged to do us any favors we may crave. Without having our whims satisfied, we can still be liberated. He knows better than we do what is right for us. He knows that we love Him. I'm absolutely sure of this. I know people who walk the path of love solely to serve their crucified Christ. Not only do they refuse spiritual delights, but they do not even desire them. In fact, they actually beseech Him not to distract them with such pleasures in this lifetime. The fifth reason we should not strive for spiritual sweetness is that it would be a complete waste of time. This is not the kind of water that is carried through conduits. We accomplish nothing by tiring ourselves out when we cannot draw water from the source. What I mean is that no matter how much we practice meditation, however hard we squeeze ourselves, or how many tears we weep, this kind of water doesn't come to us like that. God gives it only to those whom it is His will to give it, and often when the soul least expects it. We are His, friends. May He do whatever He pleases with us. May He lead us in ways that best serve Him. We must truly humble ourselves and stay detached. I say truly because this is not a matter of thinking it. Thought can deceive us. I mean utter humility, complete detachment. Whoever can do this, be assured that the Beloved will not fail to grant her such blessings and many others she does not even know how to desire. May He be praised and blessed forever. Amen. Chapter 3 of the Fourth Dwelling. I want to mention a state of prayer that usually comes before the prayer of quiet, the prayer of recollection. This is a supernatural recollection. It's not about sitting in the dark or closing your eyes or being subject to any external thing. The eyes close of their own accord, and the soul simply desires solitude. It seems that without any intervention, a temple is being built through this supernatural recollection where the soul can go to pray. The senses and other external things begin to lose their hold, and the soul starts to recover what she has lost. It has been said that sometimes the soul enters within herself, and sometimes she rises above herself. I wouldn't know how to explain anything with that kind of language. That's the problem with me. I assume you'll understand things better the way I put them, but maybe I'm only making sense to myself. Let's say that the senses and the faculties, which are the inhabitants of the interior castle, have gone outside. Let's say they have been hanging around for days and years with strangers who despise all that is beautiful about the castle. When they realize their error, they come back. But before they can re-enter the castle, they have to break the bad habits they have been accumulating. They are not traitors. They willingly linger in the vicinity of the castle until they can be allowed in again. When the great king who is dwelling in the center of the castle perceives their goodwill, he desires in his wondrous mercy to bring them back to him. He calls to them like a good shepherd beckons his sheep, with a whistle so soft they barely hear it. He teaches them to recognize his voice and discourages them from wandering off and losing their way home to their true abode. The shepherd's call grows so powerful that the ties that had bound the faculties to external things and estranged them from him unravel and they enter the castle. I don't think I have ever before explained this as clearly as I am describing it now. As St. Augustine said, after having looked for God in so many places, it is much easier to find God inside ourselves instead of looking for him in created things. It's a big help if God grants us the favor of recollection. Don't think that the mind can grasp him just by striving to imagine him dwelling within. This can be an excellent meditation practice founded on the truth that God is inside us, but it isn't the prayer of recollection. Anyone can do this visualization on her own. What I'm talking about is different. These souls may already be inside the castle before they even begin to think about God. I'm not sure how they get in or in what way they hear the shepherd's call. It certainly isn't with the ears because such a call cannot be perceived through the senses. How can I make this clearer? Anyone who has gone through it will know what I mean. The soul becomes acutely aware of gentle withdrawal inside herself. I think I read somewhere a comparison with a hedgehog curling up or a turtle drawing into its shell. But these creatures pull back into themselves whenever they feel like it. Recollection happens only when God wishes to grant us this favor. I myself maintain that His Majesty only gives this gift to those who have already begun to detach from the things of the world. I don't mean that householders should abandon their households, only that they not be obsessed with the mundane. His call to householders is a special one, drawing their attention lovingly inward. I believe that if we long to make a place for the beloved inside ourselves, He will give us this and more, calling our souls higher and higher. If you have an inner understanding of this place, praise God with all your heart. You are right to give thanks for this great favor, and giving thanks opens the door to even greater favors. Certain books teach us that this kind of prayer prepares us for being able to listen to God rather than striving to talk to Him. Instead of trying to figure Him out, the soul pays attention to whatever it is that the beloved is working inside her. Unless His Majesty has begun to absorb us, I don't see how we can put a stop to our minds without actually damaging them. There is a great deal of controversy about this in the spiritual community. I confess my lack of humility here, but no one has succeeded in convincing me of the value of beating the mind into submission. One person tried to use a book written by a man I consider to be a saint, Friar Peter of Alcantara, talk, to talk me into this position. I know that Peter truly understands these matters, and I would have happily conceded, except that as we read the book together, it became evident to us both that he is saying the same thing I am, only with different words. From what he says, it is clear that the first thing that needs to happen is for love to be awakened in the soul. I may be mistaken, but here's why I believe in not forcibly trying to curb thought. The first reason is that in this work of the Spirit, it is the one who thinks less and has the desire to do less that accomplishes more. What we have to do is beg like those who are needy when they come before a wealthy emperor, and then lower our gaze and humbly wait. When we realize through his secret ways that he has heard us, then it is best to remain silent. It is enough that he has allowed us to be near him. Even if we could engage our minds at this time, it would not be wrong to refrain from doing so. But if we are not sure if this king has seen or heard us, we should not forge ahead foolishly on our own. By struggling to induce this state of prayer, we dry up the soul. By trying not to think, we hopelessly stimulate the imagination. The Beloved wants us to ask Him for what we need and be mindful in His presence. He knows what will make us whole. Why should I scramble to make something happen that His Majesty has clearly placed limits on? I'd rather leave the doing to Him. There are plenty of other matters that He has not reserved for Himself, like renunciation, acts of charity, and devotional prayer. We can do these things on our own, to the extent that our own nature permits, and always, of course, with the help of His loving hand. The second reason is that all these inner activities are gentle and serene. To do anything painful would cause more harm than good. What I mean by painful is anything that we try to coerce ourselves into doing. Think about how much it starts to hurt to hold your breath, for instance. Leave your soul in God's hands. Let Him do whatever He wants with her. Detach as radically as you are able from your own benefit and surrender to the will of God. The third reason is that the harder you try not to think of anything, the more aroused your mind will become, and you'll think even more. The fourth is that what is most essential and pleasing to God is that we remember Him and forget ourselves, and that we honor Him and relinquish our own pleasure and comfort. But how can we forget ourselves when we are being obsessively careful not to stir our minds or desires? Such stirring can actually awaken powerful longing for God and serve as the catalyst for spontaneously praising the glory that is His. When His Majesty is ready for the mind to grow still, He engages it in another way and illumines the consciousness so completely that it remains absorbed. Then, without knowing how it happened, the mind is taught much more skillfully than we could have ever taught it on our own by trying to make it not think. Didn't God give us our own faculties to work with, and isn't this work our reward? There's no point in trying to trick them. Let them do their appointed task until God assigns them a higher one. What I understand is the best thing to do is to endeavor, without any strain or clamoring, to stem the flow of thoughts, but not to shut down the mind or suspend consciousness. It's important to be aware that you are in God's presence and remember who God is. If this remembrance alters the consciousness, so be it. But the soul shouldn't try to analyze the state she's in. It is a gift given to the will, not the intellect. Let the soul enjoy it without any effort beyond a few loving words. Even if you are not actively trying to keep yourself from thinking in this state, thoughts often cease by themselves here, at least for a moment. Remember, this kind of prayer flows as a natural spring, rather than being channeled through manufactured conduits. The mind is restrained here. Maybe it restrains itself. It realizes that it doesn't know what it wants. It wanders from one extreme to another like a fool who cannot find his assigned seat. What I'm talking about now is the kind of prayer I started off with in my discussion of this dwelling. I should have described the prayer of recollection first, which is far less profound than the prayer of spiritual sweetness I spoke of before, which I have sometimes referred to as the prayer of quiet. But it is the first step to this higher state. In the prayer of recollection, it isn't necessary to abandon discursive meditation or mental activity. Ultimately, the will rests so deeply in God that the pandemonium inside the mind is very bothersome to the soul. But if she pays too much attention to this disturbance, she will lose the sweetness she is enjoying. She must forget about all the turmoil and let herself down into the arms of God. His Majesty will teach the soul what to do next. It's all about recognizing her own limitations in the face of such a great goodness and occupying herself with giving thanks. In dealing with the prayer of recollection, I neglected to mention the signs by which we may know that God, our beloved, is blessing the soul with the prayer of quiet. Clearly, an expansion of the soul takes place, as if the water rising up from the fountain doesn't just overflow and move on. Instead, the more water that comes up, the larger the basin grows to receive it. That's what this kind of prayer does to the soul. And God works many other wonders in her, shaping and preparing her to contain abundant grace. This sweet inner expansion frees the soul from the constraints in her service to God. She is no longer oppressed by the fear of the underworld. Although she desires, more than ever, not to offend God, she is anything but groveling now. She is fully confident that she will find her delight in Him. While she used to be afraid of austerities, concerned that they would compromise her delicate health, now she knows that in God she can do everything. Her desire for self-sacrifice is much greater than before. She no longer worries about trials. Her faith is revitalized. She understands that any hardships she suffers are for God, and that His Majesty will give her the grace to bear them patiently. Sometimes she will even desire tribulation because of this intense longing to do something for God. As her awareness of the greatness of God increases, the soul more clearly perceives her own imperfections. Since she has tasted spiritual sweetness, Worldly pleasures look like garbage. She finds herself withdrawing from them little by little and gradually gaining some mastery over herself. All her virtues increase and will continue to grow even stronger as long as she doesn't turn back and offend God. If she does, she will lose everything, no matter how high up the mountain she has climbed. Please don't assume that just because God has granted the soul this favor once or twice, all these wonderful things will automatically unfold. The soul has to be actively open to them and maintain her openness. All our good lies in perseverance. If you find yourself in this state, I strongly offer you this advice. Be exceedingly conscious of the devotion you owe God and avoid any opportunity to jeopardize your commitment to Him. At this point, the soul is a baby and not yet ready to be weaned. If she turns away from her mother's breast, what can she be expected to do but die? This is what I'm afraid will happen to you on a spiritual level if you've been granted the mercy of this nurturing prayer and then give up on it. If you don't have some excellent reason from withdrawing from prayer, and if you don't come back quickly, you will go from bad to worse. I know that you will share my deep fear of this. I have watched certain people turn away from the one who, with pure love, yearned to be their friend and prove his friendship with divine action. I feel so sorry for people like this. Those of you who have been graced by this state of prayer are even more vulnerable than the majority of souls who have not been granted such a favor by the Beloved. Be extra careful to avoid occasions for error. The spirit of evil will try much harder to capture one soul so touched by God than 10,000 souls who have not been. Such a soul can do a great deal of damage to the spirit of evil by attracting others through her example away from unconsciousness and into the light of the spiritual life. The spirit of evil may have no other reason to take interest in such a soul than the fact that His Highness has shown her special love. But that's enough for the spirit of evil to burn himself out trying to lead her to perdition. You, friends, seem to be free of dangers like these. May God keep you safe from pride and vanity. You will know if the spirit of evil is trying to offer you counterfeit versions of God's favor by their effects. They will be the opposite to the effects of divine blessings. There is a danger I have seen in women in particular to succumb to that I need to warn you about. Because of our inherent tenderness, we are more likely to face this situation. That is, some women weaken their health by overdoing prayer, fasting, and severe austerities. Then, when we do receive some divine favor, they are overwhelmed. An inner sense of consolation is reflected in our outer weakness and swooning. They collapse into a state of unconsciousness they consider to be a spiritual trance and let themselves drown in it. The more they give into this, the more dissociated they become and their constitution gets even weaker. These people think that they are being carried away by rapture. I call it carried away by foolishness. All they are doing is wasting time and wrecking their health. Their senses are not transcended, and they are feeling nothing of God either. One person remained in this state for 8 hours. Fortunately, there was someone who understood her. By getting her to quit doing penance and to start to eat and sleep, she snapped her out of her stupor. Without meaning any harm, this person had misled her spiritual guides and deceived herself. I believe that the spirit of evil would do anything to get such souls, and he was making significant inroads with this one. Please understand that when something truly comes from God, there may be an inner and outer languor, but there will be no languishing in the soul. When she finds herself close to God, the soul is deeply moved. This experience does not linger, but passes all too quickly. Although she is likely to become absorbed again, the absorption is not caused by weakness. It does not wear down the body or create any particular sensations, external sensations. Take my advice. If you start to feel this swooning, tell your spiritual guide and then try to do something for fun. Your guide should urge you to radically reduce the number of hours you spend in spiritual practice and try to make you eat well and get some sleep until your natural health returns. If this doesn't work, it might be the case that you just don't have the constitution for a contemplative path. Maybe God wants you to worship Him through an active life. People like this are needed in spiritual communities. Keep yourself busy with different duties and try to avoid too much solitude, or you will ruin your health. You might feel ashamed of this lifestyle, but the beloved is testing your love for him by seeing how you bear his absence. After a while, he will give you back the strength to feel him close again. Even if he doesn't, what you gain through surrender and prescribed rituals will benefit you as much or more than what you would have earned in other ways. I know some people who have such weak minds and poor imaginations that they believe that everything that pops into their heads manifests. That kind of delusion can be very dangerous, and I will explain later. Since this is a dwelling that most souls enter, I have gone into greater detail about it. This is the place where the natural and the supernatural commingle, and so the spirit of evil can get in and do some real harm. In the dwellings to come, the beloved doesn't allow him such easy access. May God be praised forever. Amen.